Playing on a Budget is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best Magic the Gathering singles and sealed retailer on the internet, GatheringMagic.com, your #1 source for Magic the Gathering news and content, and RogueDeckBuilder.com, my personal channel filled with innovative and entertaining Magic the Gathering rogue brews. Hi there, it's Kevin with GatheringMagic.com, here with this week's episode of Playing on a Budget. Remember Warriors? There was a lot of buzz when the Warriors tribe came out in the beginning of cons, and especially when it was more supported in Fate Reforged. Now, this deck that you'll see in front of you is a rotation-proof, 100% rotation-proof. There's not one card in this list that is not going to be around after next week, after Zendikar rotates in and Theros block rotates out. Now, we have so many options for Warriors is the good news. The bad news is this is pretty much the deck list you will see after rotation, because Zendikar doesn't have really doesn't have anything in the deck. Maybe Zulaport Cutthroat, just because you want a Blood Artist effect in a deck that uses a lot of creatures. But other than that, there really isn't a lot of cards that are in the Warrior tribe or affect Warriors or really do anything for a lot of creatures in the Zendikar. So this is basically the deck you'll see post-rotation. The good news is, though, it's very powerful. It's been outclassed by red aggro strategies, but I think that red aggro strategies, if there is one deck that really gets hurt post-rotation, it is going to be red aggro, because they lose Lightning Strike and they also lose Stoke the Flames. They lose a lot of what makes red aggro decks a little more attractive to play than other aggro-based strategies is they're more resilient to board wipes, because they already get in there for that few bit of damage at the beginning, and then you can rely on cards like Stoke the Flames or Exquisite Firecraft or Lightning Strikes to get in that last bit of damage. You can always top deck your way out of that direct damage to the face with red decks. So I think that a lot of people prefer to play a strategy that has that resilience to board wipes, rather than an all-in strategy like Warriors that is very susceptible to like a Drown in Sorrow or a Languish or any sort of board wipe. Now, the next set does get a decent Converge board wipe out of Battle for Zendikar, but we lose Anger of Gods and we lose Drown in Sorrow, which I think are two very, very good cards for keeping Warriors from really shining in Standard at the moment. Is just those three converted mana cost board wipes that will completely wipe the board. So I'm thinking if the set or the Standard slows down, you can really squeeze into Warriors. This is an incredibly quick deck. You often kill on turn 4, if not turn 5. It does have a few ways to get back from board wipes, and I'll show you that when we discuss the deck tech more in depth. But before we go over the deck tech completely, I'm going to bring up the prices brought to our sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., to show you this is an incredibly affordable deck. So right now with this list, we're running around the $65 mark, and the most expensive card in the deck is going to be the one of Sorin. Now Sorin, you could actually go up higher in count with the Solemn Visitors, because it does work very well in this deck. If you +1 Sorin on turn number 4 and you have a bunch of creatures out, it usually is going to give, basically it's going to give +3/+0, +4/+0, depending on how many cards you have out. Usually +3/+0 on turn 4. And you'll be gaining the life from the lifelink from the creatures attacking in. So that is the most expensive card. You can go up. We actually have room in the budget, but I thought that for our 4-drop, we'd try Raider's Spoils and Brutal Hordechief. And the Hordechief right now is going for like $3 a piece, so everything in this deck is incredibly inexpensive. One of the issues we also have with this archetype, though, is we do lose Mana Confluence, because you don't want to play tap lands in this deck. So right now we don't have a choice but to run the Scoured Barrens. And I think that the Manland in Zendikar can replace Scoured Barrens or be an addition to, because right now we have his Caves that really fixes our mana base while not making us have a land that comes into play tapped. But comes into play tap lands aren't the worst thing that can happen in this deck, because we don't have a 3-drop. So you can easily go first turn, play a 1-drop, and then second turn, play 2 1-drops, or second turn put a tap land into play and still play a 1-drop, and third turn play 3 1-drops. I mean, it's very easy for that scenario to happen with the tap land. So let's just go down the list. We're going to be playing a total of 4, 8, 12, 14 1-drops. So the deck does come out swinging. And I'm using just 2 of Mardu Shadowspear, even though I think they're pretty good in this deck, with the dash, because dash can get around like board wipes if you want just some consistent damage that continues to stay in your hand. Bloodsoaked Champion can also come back from board wipes, so we have that added benefit. But the deck really wants a 1-1 or a 1 white drop for the Battle Brawler. Battle Brawler is one of the best cards in this deck on turn 2. It's probably your best turn 2 play, as it's a 3/2 first strike if you control a white permanent. So if you can go first turn Mardu Woe-Reaper into a second turn Battle Brawler, that's kind of the ideal play. Or like a first turn 1-drop into a second turn Chief of the Edge, and then you have a 3/2 out on turn 2 as well as a 3/2 first drop. So Battle Brawler, the first strike, do not estimate the first strike because it's very good. There's very few things that your opponent can do that can stop a first striker on turn 2. And again, you need to get in that early bit of damage, and then our late game can get us in that late bit of direct damage through the Brutal Hordechief, which says whenever a creature you control attacks, defending player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And Raider Spoils, which gives all of our creatures +1/+0, and whenever warrior deals combat damage, you can fill back up your hand by drawing a card. I don't know if this is going to end up making the cut. I've never played with it. I've always used like more Sorins, but I think Raider Spoils is on par with Sorin, and it definitely is a budget version, so I thought I'd showcase it here. We're going to be running 2 Bloodchin Ragers. I like the Bloodchin Ragers in here because it gives all of your creatures menace. And everything in your deck is going to be warriors. And we have a 1 of Chief of Scale main board and 3 of them in the sideboard. You'll bring these in against like decks that want to try to board wipe you through traditional means of damage. This card was really getting its Drown in Sorrow because if you had 2 Chief of Scales, basically all of your creatures are Drown in Sorrow resistant. And the only spells we're going to be running in this deck, I think that is the most powerful spell right now, is Valorous Stance. And then that pretty much sums up like 29 creatures. 3 of them, 3 more Secure the Waste. Secure the Waste also allows you to come back from board wipes, and that is why we're running a high land count. 23 lands is basically for Secure the Waste. I really thought about going up to 4 of them, but I think that 3 is what this deck wants. It doesn't want quite 4. So what also makes this deck pretty good is against other aggro decks, you do have ways to gain life through like Mardu Woe-Reaper, and this card's actually kind of cool with the new Eldrazi's that want to return cards from exile, because Mardu Woe-Reaper can exile a creature card from your opponent's graveyard and gain a life, and then with the abilities from the Eldrazi's to return exiles back to graveyards, this is just a very easy way to do that. So I'm thinking Mardu Woe-Reaper might be a cool card post-rotation, not even in the Warrior Tribe. So onto the sideboard, we have, I'm just running a lot of 1-ofs dragons to show, or excuse me, Warriors to kind of show what we have options. We have a Hidden Dragonslayer that is a lifelink, and then Megamorph destroys a creature with power 4 or greater. I think that this might get better against mid-range base decks. You might want more than just 1 in the sideboard. But just for this reason, I'm just running like 1 of each of these. We have a Seeker the Way. It doesn't really have the greatest way to gain lifelink, so I'm gonna show you a few other warriors we can put in here instead of Seeker. But Seeker I think is kind of cool, because it is a white permanent. It's a 2/2 with prowess. The only thing it does trigger off of, though, in this deck is the Valor Stances and the Secure the Way, so I just don't think it's good enough. But in the sideboard, it does trigger off of Duresses and Self-Inflicted Wounds and Ultimate Price. But I think that the warriors that we have access to in black and white, we have quite a few of pretty snazzy ones. We have the Mardu Shadowspears you could go up more of. We also have a 1/1 flyer for 1, which is evasion, but I kind of don't think this deck wants evasion through the traditional means. We have the Bloodchin Rager, or the Battle Brawler that can just slam through, or the Brutal Hordechief that will get the damage in no matter what. We also have a hand of Silumgar with Death Touch. A 2/1 Death Toucher is not bad in this type of deck. We have a Malachor Coldblade, which if we do go up in more of like, if this guy is kind of interesting because whenever a creature dies of opponent controls, it gets a +1/+1 counter. I just don't think it's powerful enough. We also have the Mardu Skull Hunter, which I do think is powerful enough by making your opponent discard a card. But I think that we don't want to play the attrition war in this type of deck. We just want to slam in for as much as possible. And our other 2-drops just seem to outshine the Mardu Skull Hunter. We have the Battle Brawler that's going to be a 3-2 most likely in this deck, or the Bloodshed Rager that's going to give everything menace. So I even think the Chief of the Scale from the sideboard into the main board might just be better than a Mardu Skull Hunter. So there's very few reasons I'd want to run it. Sultai Emissary does get very interesting because it's a 1/1, then when it dies, you get to manifest the top card of your library. And then that basically means that you get a 2/2, and then in this deck, you're most likely to be able to unmanifest the card you find. Mardu Hordechief was always kind of a cool card because it puts a 1/1 white warrior token and gives you a 2/3 warrior, and it is the 3-drop. I just didn't quite think it fit the bill here. I think that everything else just outshined it as far as sheer power level. And even cards like Dutiful Attendant is a warrior, and it's a 1/2 though, and it just doesn't really seem to be the right card. The card I am going to put in my sideboard is going to be this Graveblade Marauder. I want to try it out. It's a human warrior, and with a deck that runs 29 creatures, you better believe there's going to be some of them in the graveyard. And even if there's 2 cards in the graveyard, it's going to be dishing off for 3 damage. And I think we just want to try it. A 1/4 Death Touch is pretty... I think that's a pretty good card for the sideboard. And just because it can Death Touch down anything your opponent does. We also have cards like the Bloodshed Fanatic. This card is kind of cool as far as sacrificing. I wish it could sacrifice itself, though, because warriors tend not to have the greatest power. And you're gaining life, losing life and gaining life based on the power by sacrificing. The cool thing about Bloodshed Fanatic is you can attack in, and then if they block, you just sacrifice that particular creature. It's the sacrifice is a little bit high at 2. I think that it gets outclassed by too many of the cards in this deck. If they're Battle Brawler, you can sacrifice for 3 life, and just almost there. I wish the sacrifice was just 1 black. I think it'd be playable, but 2 black with a deck that wants to tap out on its lands or wants to play something on turn 4 is just, I don't know, it's just too rough. So other warriors we have at the 4-drop slot just get completely outclassed by the Brutal Hordechief. Brutal Hordechief is really good because on turn 5 it basically says win the game, because you can make all of your opponent's creatures block just 1 creature and have the rest of them come in for the damage. We have the Risen Executioner, which is kind of cool. It's a 4/3 that can come back. It gives all zombies +1/+1, but it's not, basically there's no zombies in this deck except like a Fleshbag Marauder, or you could go the Sultai Emissary, but it's just not, it's not worth it. And then we have like even a Guiltleaf Winnower that's a warrior. It might have some sideboard, might be relevant in the sideboard a little bit. Like it can kill like a Siege Rhino. Anything that's power and toughness is unequal. And in the format, there's actually quite a few cards that are unequal. But I think at 5, like if we were going to go into 5-drops, I even think the Rock would be a little bit of better. The 3/4 Rock with Raid that puts in another 3/4 would be a little bit better. And Secure the Waste is basically a card that you can consider a 5-drop, because to put you want at least 3 to 4 warriors out of the Secure the Waste. And it's going to be your mana dump rather than like Guiltleaf Winnower. So we do have options. Unfortunately, we don't get too many options out of the new set. I think Zulaport Cutthroat might fit the bill though in the 2-drop slot, just because all of your creatures will get that Blood Artist type effect and get in there for that last bit of damage, and will give you a lot of value even off a Secure the Waste type card. So it is worth looking at post rotation, but I think the deck is pretty complete, and that's basically the perfect deck to showcase right now, is what you can invest in and feel comfortable that it will be a decent deck post rotation, depending on how the metagame plays out. If it's a very, very slow metagame, I think this can easily sneak in there and steal some wins for those slow decks that aren't really prepared for a hyper aggressive deck. Anyway, we'll play some matchups here. This has been Kevin with GatheringMagic.com. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Playing on a Budget. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Gathering Magic and check out our Playing on a Budget playlist, which contains every episode. Thanks again, and hope to see you soon.